Trump administration is clearly on defense now over these proven attacks on free speech and confessions, admissions of improper motive by senior officials. The New York Times reporting there are now these measures to silence opponents that the White House wants to pursue. That would be un-American, full stop, but probably unconstitutional. We will see exactly what they try to do. But that Trump is pursuing them by invoking Kirk's killing. Tonight, there are clues about a new order Trump may push that would try to curb free speech. So this anti-speech agenda continues even as AG Bondi backtracked after admitting what I just mentioned, an unconstitutional goal of the government targeting free speech because they deem it offensive or they deem it hate speech. It's been a theme across this administration.
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
We'll probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart.
To the extent that it's part of an organized effort to inflict harm and terror and damage to the United States, there's potential investigations there.
You just heard from the AG, the deputy AG, and the president. Two of those three people described illegal or unlawful goals for the government targeting speech. The final one, you'll notice, was worded more carefully, a reference to speech that might actually lead to violence. And if you get up to violence or right near it, as I'll explain, then yes, that's different. But Bondi is facing fact checks and a backlash from really all sides of the spectrum over her completely wrong claim that I just played for you. Murdoch's Wall Street Journal hitting a point we actually reported when we first heard Bondi's remarks, that she has now failed her First Amendment test in public, flat on her face. Now, that's also bad because this is the person who's supposed to uphold the First Amendment and the rest of the Constitution as the leader of the Justice Department. I'll read to you from the Journal. She doesn't have a basic understanding of the First Amendment. It protects words and speech, including expressions of hate, which are despicable, but not legal cause for prosecution. Trump allies also now calling for a kind of speech punishment regime. They're pressing companies to fire people who have said things they don't like about Mr. Kirk or others during this tough time. And while some of those things are completely terrible, we are witnessing, adjacent to what the government's doing, a kind of right-wing cancel culture run amok, and a contradiction of the same people, same MAGA leaders and pundits' complaints about what they called woke or supposedly liberal cancel culture. Now, I told you I'd tell you how this works under the law, not anyone's outside opinion, and here it is. The Supreme Court ruled in 1989. We made that year really large so you can see how long this stuff has been clearly established, that it's a bedrock principle of the First Amendment the government may not prohibit speech simply because it's offensive or disagreeable. That applies to most things that people would call hate speech. This is long settled. I'm going to take you back a little further really quick, back to the late 60s, when there were also serious tensions over politics of violence. Real problems in the country, but back then in 69, the Supreme Court noted that speech and peaceful words are protected all the way up to the line until speech that implies and incites and gets really into causing violence or lawless action. They called it imminent lawless action. If you know how lawyers are, I got Weissman standing by. That word imminent does a lot of work because talking about something that might be lawless next year is very different from trying to get someone to break the law right in front of you. For example, words designed to cause violence this very moment, or words designed to cause fraud this very moment. So these exceptions that I'm telling you about to free speech, they are narrow. They have been established for some time. As for the current court, Justice Sotomayor weighing in on this topic. Now, being very respectful, she's not naming names, but she refers, see if you can hear the Pam Bondi call out, she refers to lawyers who should know better, suggesting that there is a competence failure for any lawyer, which includes recently Bondi, who is pushing for jailing people for their constitutionally protected free speech.
The thing that gets to me is every time I listen to a lawyer-trained representative saying we should criminalize free speech in some way, I think to myself, that law school failed.
That law school failed, or that lawyer failed. And what if that lawyer does know better but is still just saying the opposite of what the First Amendment holds because they want a DOJ that breaks the law or punishes free speech, or they want to please their boss. And that's some of the pushback. As we've noted, Bondi has backtracked, which is a sign of awareness that she's either in too much trouble or she got it wrong. But the president is not backtracking. That order I mentioned refers to political violence, but also is involved in efforts to go after people based on their viewpoints, which the First Amendment also protects. For example, trying to yank the legally justified tax-exempt status of groups because they're liberal nonprofits, or using anti-corruption laws specifically to target people based on their views or organization. Of course, you want the government to be against all corruption, but you don't want it to misuse that to chill or silence speech. Without the First Amendment, well, I couldn't be telling you this, and you couldn't be shouting back. You're welcome to disagree or add to anything that's being said in your media. But it is fundamentally what makes our elections free and fair. There are other countries that hold fake elections but punish free speech, jail dissidents, and those elections, frankly, ain't worth a damn. Your thoughts on what we just went through, including Trump officials admitting attacks on what seemed like viewpoint protection and free speech?
Yeah, I think obviously the assassination of Charlie Kirk is horrible and everybody should condemn political violence. But we don't want the administration to be using this tragedy as a way to go after protected speech. It does seem like they sort of said the quiet part out loud by saying they were going to go after hate speech, and they've Bondi and others have gotten a lot of blowback on this, and they should, frankly, because first of all, the conservatives and the Republicans have been the party that has often defended the protection of hate speech, which it's a little unclear what Bondi means when she talks about hate speech. It's commonly used to mean epithets or slurs based on race, religion, or gender.
She seems to mean people who have been hateful or extremely negative about specifically Donald Trump and his allies. They care less about card-carrying Republicans. And they seem to view even some criticism that we think is totally unerrable and some that is still in the realm of politics as all, quote, hate speech to them.
Exactly. And I think that's what the importance is of the First Amendment and having First Amendment protections is you don't want the party that's in power to use an overly broad definition of hate speech or some other kind of unprotected speech to go after their perceived enemies or critics or to censor dissent or just general free expression. And so I don't think that she's referring to the traditional definition of hate speech when she talks about going after and punishing hate speech. And as you mentioned, hate speech has long been determined to be protected, fully protected by the First Amendment. And that's part of a broader principle that the First Amendment protects speech, even that's deeply offensive to some people or to most people. And it's sort of a cost of having a vigorous free speech, public discourse, and freedom of thought that I think we all think is extremely important. And so the idea that they're going to go out and just use this under the guise of targeting hate speech to just essentially try to punish people that have different viewpoints than they have or who criticize the Trump administration, that's completely against what the First Amendment, the central meaning of the First Amendment.
Andrew, the reports around the Trump order and the effort they want to wage this week is to go after people and groups based on their views, based on their beliefs. Is that a First Amendment problem?
Yeah, well, that's going to be struck down. And this is not the first time for this administration. Let's just take the 4 executive orders with respect to law firms. All 4 were struck down on First Amendment grounds. So this would be yet another instance of that. And the irony of this is, let's just go back to this president on the ellipse on January 6th saying essentially that if we don't, stand up and fight for our country, we won't have it anymore. I'm just paraphrasing.
Yeah, fight like hell.
And when he was charged criminally, he attacked that indictment saying that violates the First Amendment. and saying that it hadn't crossed the line, the one that you had talked about to being sort of imminent and inciting. And Jack Smith was actually fairly careful to not charge the ellipse speech for that reason.
Right.
Because of the concern about the First Amendment, and that line is so important because people should be free to voice their views even when they're despicable, until and unless it gets to that sort of imminent violence. And that was something that Donald Trump embraced as a defense in his own criminal cases. Now the shoe's on the other foot, and they're really using it as a weapon, not a shield.
Yeah. President Obama spoke out about this, and while he is known for his equanimity, a word you might use, he didn't just say the fundamentals, although he did, and we condemn all political violence, and we need to have free and fair debate in this country. But then he also used this platform, knowing the environment we're in, to reference facts about how Donald Trump has spoken and discussed politics. Take a look.
When I hear not just our current president, but his aides, who have a history of calling political opponents vermin, enemies, who need to be targeted, that speaks to a broader problem that we have right now, and something that we're going to have to grapple with, all of us.